Have you ever had an idea so big you weren't sure where it was going to take you, and then you decided to fly through the window anyway? I hope that as you decide where you're going next, that you see and make the windshield bigger than your rear view mirror. Have you ever had a theme that kept coming up and you had to explore it? That's what happened last fall. I was advising the HerCsuite Next Career Mastermind, and a topic just kept coming up, and it was how to stay relevant over 50. And I thought, wow, I need to look into this. I have ideas of what I think it would be, but I wasn't sure. The context was that women in our mastermind were exploring whether they would stay in their corporate roles. Some were retiring, others were looking to land new roles, and some of them were over 60 and facing ageism and other challenges. What I thought was going to come back in my search were ideas around AI and how you need to take new courses or learn new things to gain that extra something that would get you noticed if you were interviewing or perhaps moving to the C-suite or a board role. Instead, there was only one article that stood out to me, and it was written by a man. And for our allies out there listening, please don't take this personally. This author's advice was ask someone younger than ourselves for fashion ideas. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with fashion ideas. In fact, that's how I met one of the authors in this book that we are releasing. However, in this context, the thought was that if we looked younger and dressed younger, that would make us relevant. Well, my friend, that lit a fire under me, and I brought this to the mastermind. When I shared this advice, there was a unanimous what, followed by we're not done yet. And then we need to do something about this. Over the next few sessions, an idea was percolating. And I had recently been featured as a contributing author in Brave Women at Work Lessons in Leadership and thought this might make a really good book. And I decided to reach out to my friends and colleagues, Hope Mueller from Hunter Street Press and Jen Pestikas from Brave Women at Work. Together, we decided to take action. It was high time to come out with a book for women over 50 that celebrated our accomplishments and defined what relevance looked like for us. We would be able to decide what forward thinking was and how we could gain that competitive advantage. Flash forward to this moment right now, and we're almost at the release date of our ebook on August 5th, and I'm so excited. This anthology includes 8 amazing authors. I'm also featured in the book, and I learned some surprising details about these women. Even though I had known them or met them previously, I didn't know all these details that came out as a result of writing this book. I don't want to ruin the surprise. You'll have to stay tuned for their interviews here on HerCsuite Radio and find out what they each wrote about. I can't wait to have interviews with some of the authors coming up and sharing their stories in the book that we're about to release, The Power of What's Next, Bold Moves by Design. That is the title. Isn't that catchy? I'm so excited about it. I know that you're going to discover the same things that I did, which is we have the power. We have it in us to do whatever it is that we can dream up. If you've ever written anything, an article, a blog, or even a paper in college, you know there's always a sense of discovery and learning. I have written over 500 blogs. I know, that seems crazy, right? It started when I wrote Girl Empowered. It was a blog for myself and my younger daughter, Valentina, and I wrote 100 blogs for that. I then had a podcast, and that podcast, Rock Your Trade Shows, had 100 blogs. And this podcast, we're at 200 and almost 30 episodes, and I've had a blog for each of these shows, as well as I've written other blogs. almost 500 blogs. That's a lot of writing. And I've discovered something in each instance. But I'll tell you, when you write a chapter that is about you, it opens all kinds of things of discovery. Each time I've discovered something about myself, and I had to dig deep to not only share it, but also to explore what it could mean. I discovered real personal aha moments and even some things that surprised me that I had forgotten or I discarded or even brushed aside about my career. This was a tremendous journey for me, talking about not only my career, but also going back to where did I learn some of the things that I really enjoy doing? And if we think back in our lives, sometimes it surprises us where we might have picked things up. I do have a lot of decades behind me in building and leading, but I really wanted to think about what was it that made me decide to be an entrepreneur in the first place. And I started thinking about, well, who was in my life that was an entrepreneur? It turned out it was the most unsuspecting person I could have imagined, my mom. She was a medical librarian. She worked at the University of Michigan Hospital. She had an office that was pretty much a closet in the urology department, and it was a long, narrow room, less long and more narrow. And there were microfiche, and that's where she did her research. And she would type up reports for urologists so that they could learn about things that they could help their patients with. She really was the first entrepreneur I'd ever been exposed to, but I didn't even think of it that way. When I was in high school, she came to me and she was a little nervous and said, I'd like to talk to you about something. If you're a teenage girl and your mom says, I want to talk to you about something, you're not actually sure what that could be and what was that conversation going to take place and how were you going to respond? Well, I sat down with my mom and she told me that although she'd been a medical librarian at the hospital, she was ready to go out on her own and start her own business. The thing was, she didn't have the one tool that she needed, an electronic typewriter. And wait for it, it had to have whiteout tape. If you are of a certain age listening to the show, you will remember the electronic typewriter, which was a huge innovation, and whiteout tape, because then you didn't need the globby whiteout stuff that you would put on the paper. It actually would smoothly remove the text and you could type over it, essentially. Not perfect, but it was a huge step forward. I know I'm going back way back in the decades before personal computers, before loans for women owned businesses. No one was handing out money for women to start a business back then. And it turned out that I had a little money saved because my dad had passed away. And my mom nervously asked me if I would give her a loan for this typewriter. Of course, I said yes without even thinking about it. I mean, it was my mom. Why wouldn't I say yes? And so she started her business and she ran it for 4 years until she retired. I watched her turn an idea into an actual service. She saw an unmet need. Doctors needed clinical research delivered in a way that would help them improve patient outcomes. And she knew how to get that done. Imagine that. And I hadn't thought about it in decades, literally, until I wrote my chapter. And I started thinking about how I became an entrepreneur in my 50s, like my mom did before me. And suddenly I remembered my mom did that. She was the first example. She had led the way. And sadly, she's not here with us anymore. And she wasn't able to see that I reflected back to her her courage. But I know she's somewhere smiling and knowing that I am doing something that I love, just like she had. There have been moments writing this chapter, I discovered things that I hadn't realized and also things that I wanted to share and embrace and tell you about as a reader and as someone that I want to help you explore. You find out things you didn't realize were holding you back, or maybe something that you weren't ready to share. And I have had Megan Van Buten on this show. She's my executive coach, and she has helped me uncover so much this year about myself, including this idea of making the windshield bigger than our rear view mirror. And as I was thinking about this, I had forgotten where I actually learned skills. Has this ever happened to you where you kind of brush aside things that come easily and you don't think that this is something that is of advantage that you could use? I realized that I had forgotten really the core of something that was part of my life for a very long time. And what happened was I talked to a lot of women outside of this book and outside of this podcast. Through her C suite, I meet a lot of amazing women. And in one of my conversations, I discovered a woman who had forgotten that she was certified in calligraphy. It turns out to be certified in calligraphy, you have to take 4 years, 4 years of time. And she had completely forgotten it. She was an executive and she had become very successful and she'd forgotten that she had actually had this skill, and she is now embarking on a new business and I'm so excited for her. And it made me think about when I was writing this chapter, what do I do naturally that I overlook? I started thinking about how I connect the dots. And when I talk to people, I sometimes get a look, like a dazed look on my face, and I see all these things that are connecting in front of me. And one of my superpowers is I introduce people. But the other thing is I can see around corners and see opportunities before anyone else spots them. And I couldn't think about, where did I learn that? And I thought, well, where did I get the connect the dot and see around the corners idea? And where did that come from? And writing this chapter helped me see it. It came from sailboat racing. In college, I raced sailboats. I joined the University of Michigan sailing team and had a choice. I could be a skipper or the crew. I chose to be the crew, even though I had grown up sailing my whole life and knew exactly how to captain a boat. People were surprised that I chose to be the crew, but I knew that it was the strategic role. You see, when you're a crew on a sailboat, you're watching for the tiniest shifts, the wind that comes. And if you're going downwind and you see that wind coming across the water and you shift where you're going, is the difference between first place and fifth place. The way the wind moves is everything. And isn't that true about life? If we really get in tune with what is happening around us, we can adjust our sails and shift what we're doing. I started learning how to watch competitors. I would watch their body language. I would listen to them the night before regatta. What were they talking about and what were they doing? Even what were they eating? When I was on the female team at nationals, we had this whole thing about what we were eating to bulk up to be able to have enough energy because it was super windy out and we knew we needed the energy to be able to do the race. And we were kind of watching the other teams to see if they were doing the same thing. All of those things that we learn along the way are ingrained and imprinted in how we lead others. And it gives us the opportunity to tap into something and keep it going, really. And I loved these details, the patterns, the tactics, and I realized that's where I learned to connect the dots. So in the chapter, I talk about that and I talk about making the windshield bigger than the rear view mirror. I started planning a portfolio career, and that's where it all started. When you begin to think about your portfolio career, and it's never too early, what is the life you want to live? And what are the things you like to do? And think back. It can go way back, like I just did with you. Or maybe it was something 5 minutes ago that you discovered, hey, you know what? I like to paint. Whatever that is, it'll help you look forward. You can ask yourself, what do I love doing? What lifts me up? What impact do I want to make? And then you design your life around those values, not just roles, not just careers, but around the things that light you up. For me, seeing around the corners, that was natural, but I had to write it to see it. That's the beauty of storytelling. In the power of what's next, none of us used AI. Everything came from our lived experiences, from our hearts, our history, and our forward thinking, resilience, transformation, and ideas of what you can do to boldly move forward. That's what makes this book so special. I'm honored to be in this anthology alongside Diane Boyer, Wendy Brown, Nancy Hedlund, Jennifer Peters, Liesl Schmidt, Lori Wessels, Janet Winkler, and Cindy Wolfsberg, all amazing authors, and also with the two most amazing partners on this journey, Jennifer Pestikas and Hope Mueller, who have helped us bring our stories to light. I've learned so much about each of them and about myself. This project has been a journey of transformation, resilience, and I hope for you, you'll feel inspired when you read our book. As you think about your own story and what's next, I invite you not to brush aside the moments that made you who you are, but to think about the things you've overlooked that may be your superpower. That's what makes your mosaic unique. My hope is when you read our book, and I truly hope you will, you'll be inspired by the stories of these women who said, yes, I can, yes, I will, and yes, I am just getting started. On August 5th, the ebook launches, and for one day only, it will be 99 cents. I hope you'll join us on that day. We'll be talking about it here on the show. You'll be able to read all about it. And most importantly, I hope you'll feel inspired to ask yourself, what's next? And know whatever you choose, you can do it. I believe in you. Thank you for spending your time with me today. This was a personal episode telling you all about things in my life as a way of telling you how you can think about your lives and what the future holds. More than anything, I hope it reminds you that sometimes we overlook what we know. We may brush it aside. Now's the time to uncover your gifts. Make your windshield bigger than the rearview mirror. Look forward. Don't forget to check those side mirrors because opportunities might be closer than you think. Keep shining your light bright. The world needs you.